everybody. It's Matt. This is a 10-minute Bible Hour podcast, and I have been dealing with a very long-term cough. Super disappointing. Makes this part of my day very difficult, actually. So I am going to take some proactive action here. I got some Luden's cough drops I found upstairs, but it's an assorted flavors pack, and I'm kind of worried about what I'm going to get here. Looks like maybe there's some pineapple. Oh, I would not want a pineapple cough drop. Some honey, berry stuff, watermelon, and wild cherry. Obviously, I want the wild cherry, but in the spirit of fate, or at least the appearance thereof, being a character in our journey through Esther, I'm just going to pick one, and whatever it is, even if it's a pineapple, I am going to use it to combat my cough while we talk. Oh, this is promising. Is that pink or red? Either way, it's going to be good. I got... Oh, yes! Yes! That's wild cherry. Oh, and it's delicious. This is going to be a good day. We're going to have a great conversation. I can tell right now. Here's the thing. You ever seen one of those movies where it's got the plot structure where there's a bad guy and he needs to make some Deathray or something, and there's only one scientist who can do it, but the scientist is like, no more, I'm not going to be a part of your evil anymore. I'm going to use science to help people. But then the bad guy tracks him down. It's like, ha, I found you. You have to make me a Deathray. And the scientist is like, I'm never going to do it. I'd rather die. And then the bad guy's like, how very noble of you. And might I also add, as he grabs a picture off of a shelf or something of the scientist's family, that this is a beautiful family you have here. It would be a pity if something happened to them. And then the scientist guy's like, no, you monster, you'd never. Wouldn't I? Build me the Deathray. And then the science guy's like, okay, all right, fine. I'm building the Deathray, but this is the last Deathray. It occurs to me this is actually the plot of Rogue One. I did not set out to end up there as we got started. I kind of like Rogue One from Star Wars universe. At least I thought I did. Whatever. I think we're running into one of those kind of situations here in Esther chapter 4, and you just got to know up front, not everybody agrees with me on this. There are a couple different reads on this part of Esther, and I want to try to be fair to the one that isn't mine. My read is this. Based only on what we know through 3.5 full chapters that we've worked our way through, it's ambiguous as to what kind of people Esther and Mordecai are. We don't know yet. There's a spark of something cool there, but so far we've more just seen their shrewdness and their talent on display. We haven't seen them really develop as heroes yet, though. I mean, Mordecai saved the king. Was that a good thing? Was that a bad thing? Was that self-serving? We don't really know that yet. Esther won a contest. That's pretty cool, but that could easily be construed as self-serving as well. The outstanding question with these two characters is what kind of people actually are they when push comes to shove? And now push is coming to shove. And what we're finding is that Esther is not leaping at the opportunity to be a hero. And Mordecai is more than willing to do the thing, in my opinion, the super evil space bad guy does in that particular type of story that I was describing early on. So that's my read. What we're getting here in chapter 4 is an inflection point for these characters where they are either going to spiral into their lack of good character or they are going to be prompted to rise to something better. But other people look at this passage and they say, nah, just in this kind of ancient literature, just the fact that this is clearly a book that is written to the home team, just the fact that they're Jewish tells you what you need to know, or told the original audience what they need to know. They're good guys. They've been oppressed. They've been on a tough run. They're a part of this national identity of suffering and of being the recipients of God's long-term redemptive plan and redemptive promises. And they would say, no, Matt, you're not being fair. At this point, you're reading it a little too much like other types of storytelling. You got to understand that this is very ethnocentric storytelling from a Jewish perspective in the 5th century BC, and it works a little bit different. And to them, I would say, I don't think you're giving the 5th century BC Jews enough credit. I think this book comes off as hyper-sophisticated, indicating to me that whoever wrote it knew that their audience was hyper-sophisticated. And a sophisticated audience can roll with some ambiguity in the first half of a given story as to who the main characters, who the point of view characters are going to turn out to be, whether they turn out to be awesome or whether they might even fail to rise to the occasion. But let me just read it to you. You make of it what you will. Here's the facts. We got Mordecai. He's grieving. Esther hears about it. We're about 5 years down the road from when she won the contest and became queen. She's not as popular with the king anymore. There's a eunuch who's a go-between between the two. Esther sends a message to Mordecai. Mordecai tells the eunuch everything about Haman's plan, including exactly how much money he offered to kill all of the Jewish people. And then he sends the eunuch back into the palace to Esther to persuade her to go talk to the king to try to get this edict for the execution of the Jews to go away. Pick it up in Esther 4, verse 9. So Hathach, that's the eunuch, went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed Hathach to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that that person be put to death. The only exception for this is the king to extend the golden scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. No commentary. I'm just going to keep reading. Verse 12. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Don't think that because you're in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you've come to a royal position for a time such as this. Now you might be saying, Matt, you're not being fair, because you read Mordecai's words like all mean and stuff, like he was being threatening, like evil space dictator guy. Maybe you should try it again, but read his words more nicely. And to you, I would say, fair point, my biases are coming through. Let me read it with Mordecai sounding nicer. Imagine his eyebrows going up in the middle tender-heartedly as he says this. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Don't think that because you're in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to a royal position for such a time as this? It's not better. Now it just sounds patronizing and mean. Look, I'm not even saying Mordecai is wrong to apply this pressure or make it happen. Remember, yesterday or the day before, whenever it was, he already outed Esther. He told a eunuch. Eunuchs are in charge of intrigue and gossip. If Hathach knows, this thing is already a ticking time bomb. Maybe what Mordecai's trying to do is just say, look, I understand your position, but you're our only hope. I've got to play this card, and I've kind of already set things in motion, so you're going to have to help. Maybe that's what he meant to communicate by telling Hathach that Esther was Jewish, or seriously intoning it. But if not, he's become very explicit in that last little speech. He is saying, plain as day, if you don't act, the authorities that be will find out that you are Jewish. Well, only two people know that she's Jewish who are in the game at all, Hathach and Mordecai. So who's going to tell on her? I think he's saying one of the two of us are going to tell on you. Now, I know at this point, it seems like I'm being really hard on Mordecai, but I think this is also the point where he differentiates himself from Horrible Space Dictator. Horrible Space Dictator wants to kill people with a death ray. Mordecai is trying to save people from getting killed by a metaphorical death ray. And so my opening analogy does break down quite substantially right here, because in this situation, Mordecai's coming to her and being like, hey, use your position and your unique power to save a whole bunch of people from some horrible, evil, murderous maniac. He just happens to persuade her in a way that really puts the screws to her and her family with a veiled threat that I do think is present. Now, further, there's some people who look at this passage and they're like, no, I think Mordecai comes off pretty well here because he says that if you remain silent, deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. And I've even read people who've tried to make the case that what he's probably saying there is that God will deliver us in another way. But he doesn't say that. Rather, it looks like he's imagining that another human deliverer is going to rise up. But on this one, maybe I'm a little more willing to concede the point. Maybe there's a linguistic barrier here. And what Mordecai really is saying, and it's just a little bit lost in translation, is that he does have faith, and discreetly he's saying, look, I don't know exactly how God does everything or how that works, but he's come through in the past for our people, and I think he will here as well. There's an opportunity for you to play the role of deliverer, the role of Moses. You got to take on this role, and you got to do this. I think probably a little more likely is that he is being optimistic, and he really does see a pathway forward for resolving this crisis. And the easiest pathway to resolution is through the potential work of Queen Esther, but maybe he sees other pathways for resolution as well. Ultimately, I think you can read all of this stuff either way, and it still brings us to the same point as I turn the page over to the end of chapter 4. Esther realizes that if she does nothing, she's almost certainly going to die. If she does something, she only might die. And that would appear to be the beginning of this big growth arc for her character, where that plucky courage and charisma we saw early on that benefited her is now about to be morphed and repurposed into something that's going to benefit something much, much bigger than her. No matter how you slice it, and no matter how hard it was to get to this point, now both characters seem to be at the beginning of the hero part of the arc of their story. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The fact that Esther and Mordecai were not automatically from the beginning awesome at everything and right about everything makes them more interesting and the story better and more applicable to questions about life and faith and providence and courage in our own lives today than if they were just perfect and amazing from the word go. So I like it this way better anyhow. And to commemorate that our conversation has come to an end, I will now crunch what's left of my cough drop. That was it. Okay, I think it really helped. I'm out. It was a time about our podcast.